Volume 3, Book 7, Vendémiaire. Now, the final book of Carlyle's French Revolution, entitled Vendémiaire, comes from, first of all, the revolutionary calendar. It was the first month in the revolutionary calendar year. It coincided with September-October. And the etymology of Vendémiaire comes from an old Occitan word meaning to reap one's harvest. And so Carlyle wants us to think of that imagery, reaping a harvest, and apply it to the French Revolution itself. So not only do these events coincide with that part of the revolutionary calendar, but symbolically it is the revolution reaping its own harvest. To continue the national regeneration with their own heads on their shoulders, and yet, so it verily was, says Carlyle, the insignificant stone they had struck out, so insignificant anywhere else, proved to be the keystone. The whole archwork and edifice of Sansculottism began to loosen, to crack, to yawn. Tumbled piecemeal with considerable rapidity, plunge after plunge, till the abyss had swallowed it all, and in this upper world Sansculottism was no more. The death of Robespierre, maintains Carlyle, was a signal at which the great multitudes of men, struck dumb with terror heretofore, rose out of their hiding places. And again, he's using biblical imagery there. The multitude of men coming from Acts. Camille had demanded a committee of mercy, could not get it. But now the whole nation resolves itself into a committee of mercy. The nation has tried Sansculottism and is wary of it. The nation can get wary. The nation goes through... The nation experiences these events like a man experiences his own years, right? He can try something and then grow wary of it. Sansculottism on the 9th night of Thermidor suicidally fractured its underjaw, lies writhing, never to rise more. Again, the allusion directly to Robespierre as the Carlylean central great man in the Reign of Terror. So without him, the whole thing fractures its underjaw. Not just Robespierre himself. To perish in a new singular system of culottism and arrangement. Be there order, cry all men. Or at that of the drill sergeant. And so there are three key acts that arise in this period. Two of the first acts of the convention, very natural for it after this Thermidor, are to be specified here. The first is renewal of the governing committees. Both Sûreté Générale and Salut Public, thinned by the guillotine, need filling up. We naturally fill them up with talions, frérons, victorious Thermidorian men. Again, think about it. You need to stock all institutions with men. The institutions themselves are not revolutionary or reactionary by their own nature. It's the men within them that make it so. They've thinned themselves out, and they actually get stocked at this point with Thermidorian men. The convention will no more lie under a bondage of committees, under terror of death, but be a free convention, free to follow its own judgment, and the force of public opinion. And finally, the third point that Carlyle makes is that prisoners and persons under accusation shall have the right to demand some writ of accusation and see clearly what they are accused of. Turned are the tables. Prisoners pouring out in floods, jailers moutons, and the tale of Robespierre going now whither they were wont to send. Poor resuscitated Nantes. Remember Nantes being the heartland of the Vendée, and the particularly harsh terror was implemented there. And journals and speech, and universal committee of mercy. We have deputations arriving from Arras denouncing the atrocities of Representative Le Bon. So this sense of what Carlyle calls the omnipotent mother society, that's fallen. The town hall remains in a broken, submissive state. Louvets, Inards, Lanjuinais, and the wrecks of Girondism. These are old Girondins from before they were pushed out. They're recalled to their haylofts, and caves in Switzerland, they'll resume their place in the convention. Natural foes of terror, Thermidorian talion, and mere foes of terror, rule in this convention and rule out of it. And so that's the decadence of the revolution, which Carlyle picks straight from L'Allemand, C'était le commencement de la décadence. Chapter 2, La Cabarrus, There is no pilot. There is not now even a Danton. So that's the point. Men need to fill an institution, but despite more Thermidorian men coming back in, there's still no pilot to it. Who could undertake to steer you anywhither? Nevertheless, things are becoming culotic, right? The clothes are coming back on. The naked ferocity of it is dwindled. In winter 1793, men went in red nightcap, municipals themselves in sabots. The very citoyens had to petition against such headgear. But now, in this winter 1794, where is the red nightcap? So again, the culottism. Remember, Carlyle wrote Sartor Resartus, Tailory Tailored, about the character Teufelsdruck, who is going to create a great theory of vestments and how they affect the character of the person. So Carlyle always has this interest in clothing and what it has to say about a regime or a person. There is such an effervescence of luxury, for your emigrant ci-devants carried not their mansions and furnitures out of the country with them, but left them standing here, and in the swift changes of property, and what with money coined on the Place de la Révolution, what with army furnishing sales of emigrant domains and church lands and king's lands, and then with the Aladdin's lamp of Agio in a time of paper money, such mansions have found new occupants. The fair Cabarrus, hence where the chapter gets its name, is come out of prison, wedded to her red gloomy Dis, the Dantaic vision of Dis there, whom they say she treats too loftily. Fair Cabarrus gives the most brilliant soirees. So Teresa Cabarrus was actually Madame Tallien, right? She's Tallien's wife, Spanish-born, hence La Cabarrus, but a French noble, and she starts to cultivate the new salon, right? The new society begins to cultivate around her, and it is in a bit of a decadent form. She, at this point, is not married to Tallien. That would occur in December 1794, but we're beginning to cement her vision, which is all these like Greek salons, more culotic salons, as Carlyle will put it, and then the marriage to the Thermidorian Tallien. That is literally the marriage we're going to witness. Re-civilized, even as of old they were civilized, by witchery of the Orphic fiddle bow, again she liked Greek-themed parties, and utopian rhythm, by the graces, by the smiles. Thermidorian deputies are there in those soirees, Editor Fréron, Orateur de Peuple, Barras, who has known other dances than the Carmagnole. Grim generals of the Republic are there, among which latter do we recognize once more that little bronze-complexioned artillery officer of Toulon home from the Italian wars. One Napoleon also starts to move around these circles. So in the Vendémiaire, in the harvest, the figure of Napoleon emerges. They need a pilot. Recall that. Carlyle is insistent that Tallien is not a pilot. A dissocial man? Well, dissocial enough, a natural terror and horror to all phantoms and phantasms, being himself of the genus reality. Napoleon represents the reality, and everything will return to that reality, or that sort of saddle point. At the kind of glance Josephine Beauharnais, and for the rest, with severe countenance, with open eyes and closed lips, waits what will betide. So, Teresa Cabarrus is going to lay the platform for Napoleon to meet Josephine, and for that circle, the true reality of to generate. In the Théâtre Feydeau, young Valour in square-tailed coats eyes beauty in Greek sandals, and kindles by her glances. Down with Jacobinism. No Jacobin hymn or demonstration, only Thermidorian ones shall be permitted here. Indeed, is not the dandy culotic, habilitory, by law of existence, a cloth animal? The dandy, right, this whole conception of the dressing up. You have to be culotic. That inexpressible tone of society known under the old kings, when sin had lost all its deformity, with or without advantage to us, and ere nothing had obtained such a local habitation and establishment as she never had, be recovered, or even whether it be not lost beyond recovery. Again, there Carlyle's quoting de Stael's considerations as he is witnessing these soirees. Either way, the world must contrive and struggle on. So there's still elements of contrivance here again. Talion is not quite the reality yet. That's in the form of Napoleon. Chapter 3, Quiberon. So Quiberon is a bay out in the Vendée, where in 1795 there's going to be a counter-revolutionary charge to try and keep going with this, right? Why stop at the Thermidorians? And this is going to be a case where Carlyle will show you that we haven't reached the reality yet, and we need to go through proto-Napoleons. We've had Lafayette, we've had Dumouriez as proto-Napoleons before this. The old must be swept out. The Republic has to hate these politicians adequately, and also hate the guillotine itself. So the Republic, abhorrent of a guillotine, loves her army. That's where the reality has been orientated for some while, hence why we've had the proto-Napoleons emerging from that class. Through maritime Alps, through gorges of Pyrenees, through low countries, northward along the Rhine valley, far as Chimeria hurled back from the sacred motherland, they've carried her tricolour over the faces of all her enemies. Not scutcheons with 4 degrees of nobility, but ci-devants, sergeants, who have had to clutch generalship out of the cannon's throat. A Pichegru, a Jourdan, a Hoche, lead them on. So we've had Hoche, a general, for instance, quashing down anti-revolutionary forces in Brittany in 1795 as well. So these are other proto-Napoleons. Pichegru, Jourdan, Hoche. Carlyle lists them off. Fled is York. Fled is the stadtholder, glad to escape to England, to leave Holland, to fraternise. From Cadiz to Archangel, mad sans-culottism, drilled now into soldiership, led on by some armed soldier of democracy, begins to take the form of the reality Carlyle wants. And again, that quote, the armed soldier of democracy, comes from the memoirs of Mirabeau, harking back to the first new king iteration Carlyle gave us in this revolution. Rash coalized kings, such a fire have ye kindled. So long this Gaelic fire, remember Carlyle seemed to think this is old Gallic eruption in the undercurrent of the revolution. Through its successive changes in colour of character will blaze over the face of Europe and afflict and scorch all men. The majesty of Spain, as we predicted, makes peace. So there's a couple of peace treaties being made in 1795. Also the majesty of Prussia. There's a treaty of Bâle. That puts us exact at a date, 5th of April 1795. The Treaty of Basel. General Hoche has even succeeded in pacificating La Vendée. La Roche-Jacqueline, last of our nobles, fell in battle. The frightful gangrene of La Vendée, the sort of persistent ulcer on the side of France, or side of revolutionary France, that still had royalist sentiments, they seem veritably extirpated. In the month of July 1795, English ships will ride in Quiberon roads. There will be debarkation of chivalrous ci-devants, of volunteer prisoners of war, eager to desert, of firearms, proclamations, closed chests, royalists, specie. Whereupon, also, on the Republican side, there will be rapid stand to arms, with ambuscade marchings by Quiberon beach. A ci-devant puissé, as totally ineffectual here as he was in Calvados when he rode from Vernon Castle without boots. So Carlyle does give us a counter-revolutionary ci-devant, or coal king as he's describing them, one Joseph de Puissé, who's leading the counter-revolutionary forces in Quiberon. But Carlyle does not place him as being worthy to the mantle of reality king. Chapter 4, Lion Not Dead. The convention, born on the tide of fortune towards foreign victory and driven out by strong wind of public opinion towards clemency and luxury, is rushing fast. All skill of pilotage is needed, and more than all in such velocity. Agreed to consummate the apotheosis of Marat. Transported to the pantheon of great men, so Marat goes to the pantheon of great men, despite this so-called luxury and Thermidorian sentiment coming back into the fold, they still put Marat into the pantheon. Flinging out Mirabeau to make room for him. Poor Mirabeau. Action's wheel still turns. To no purpose, so strong blows public opinion. A gilt youthhood in plaited hairdresses tears down his busts from the Théâtre Feydeau, tramples them underfoot, scatters them with vociferation into the cesspool of Montmartre. When will the Constitution 93, that of 1793, come into action? Well, we've had a lot about the Constitution and the ability to make it march, and that's still the perennial question of the revolutionaries. Where now are the Jacobins? Well, against the traitorous Thermidorian Convention and the current things. So there's an attempt here to try and go back to Jacobinism in the centre of Paris, right? Marat into the pantheon. There's a bit of public opinion that still wants that. B.O. from the Jacobin Tribune says, "The lion is not dead, he is only sleeping." Talk was in the government of committees of suspending the Jacobin sessions. So a month, Pt.20 November, year named of our grace 1794. So we're going to go back a bit to the autumn of 1794 for this sort of Jacobinism take. Sad eve of Jacobinism. The female Jacobinism's famed tricoteuses with knitting needles take flight, are met at the doors by a gilt youthhood and mob of 4,000 persons, hooted, flouted, hustled, fustigated in a scandalous manner, cotillon retoussé, and vanish in mere hysterics. Sally out, ye male Jacobins. Authority has to intervene, and again on the morrow to intervene, to suspend the Jacobin session forever and a day. So these sort of real Jacobin sessions where the real law of the land was made, mother societies and all of that, have to be properly stamped out, and they're done so throughout this November 1794. Gone are the Jacobins into invisibility, market of Thermidor IX into a market of Saint-Honoré. Our Collot, our Biot, Barrère, Vadier, in these last days of March 1795, so the crushing out of the Jacobinism stems into the beginning of 1795, are found worthy of deportation, of banishment beyond seas. They stamp their foot hardly on the Jacobin meetings to make sure that the lion is dead. On the day they call 12th of Germinal, which is also called 1st of April, not a lucky day, how lively are these streets of Paris once more, floods of hungry women, of squalid hungry men, ejaculating bread, bread, and the Constitution of 93. Paris has arisen once again, like the ocean tide is flowing towards the Tuileries, for bread and a Constitution. Tuileries sentries do their best, but serves it not. Bread, not bursts of parliamentary eloquence, so wailed the Menads of Maillard 5 years ago and more. That infamous march on Versailles, led by Maillard of the Menads. So waily to this hour, the convention with unalterable countenance, with what thought one knows, keeps its seat on this waste, howling chaos. This is known as the Revolt of Germinal. But it's a vain cry, says Carlyle. The time was when Usher, Maillard, and the Menads could alter the course of legislation. But that time is not now. Legislation seems to have got bayonets. Section Le Pelletier takes its firelock. Our cry of hunger is called a plot of pit. So they managed to turn the cry of hunger, the demand for bread, this convention have turned that in a narrative sense to be a plot of pit, to be a plot of the foreigner. So again, everything falls back on the achievement of the army. So we're able to put down now the sort of hungry mass mob that they couldn't do in 1789. Now they can do it because we're beginning to have the proto-Napoleons emerge from the army, and you use that army sort of narrative that you were at war with England, with Pitt, and that anything that's against you is therefore a plot of Pitt. Chapter 5. Lion sprawling its last. Fouquier-Tinville pleaded at the bar once his own. For the rest, Fouquier died hard enough. Where are thy batches, howled the people? Hungry canal, asked Fouquier. Is thy bread cheaper, wanting them? So we've come across this character, Antoine Quentin Fouquier-Tinville, He dies in May 1795. He, who was the public prosecutor for much of the Revolutionary Tribunal, now is prosecuted himself in turn. A most remarkable attorney that ever lived and hunted in the upper air, says Carlyle, of this man Tonville. For in this terrestrial course of time there was to be an avatar of attorneyism. Vanish, thou rat-eyed incarnation of attorneyism. So Fouquier Tinville above all else. Carlyle puts, he always said that the revolution was from the very beginning one of the attorney class, and it was ultimately personified by Fouquier Tinville. Revolutionary Tribunal has done, but vengeance has not done. Representative Le Bon, after long struggling, is handed over to the ordinary law courts, and by them guillotined. Nay, at Lyon and elsewhere, resuscitated moderatism in its vengeance will not wait to slow the process of law. There go vengeful, truculent companies of Jesus, companies of the Son, slaying Jacobinism, wherever they meet it, flinging it into the Rhone. At Toulon, Jacobinism rises in revolt, and is like to hang national representatives. This convention, again, stocked by men who filled it after it got decimated by the guillotine. They've seen Carmagnoles dance before it, and patriotic strophes sung amid church spoils, the wounded of the 10th of August defile in hand-barrows, and through Dantoned voice, awake, O France, and smite the tyrants, they seem to have found the courage to put down the Jacobinism, once and for all, now frozen mute under its Robespierre, and answering its dirge voice by dubious gasp. Revolt of Germinal 12th ended as a vain cry. Moribund sans-culottism was swept back into invisibility. Jacobins were disarmed, flung forth from that tribune in mid-air. When we reached the first month of Prairial, the equivalent of 20th of May, 1795, a sound of General once more beating sharp rantan. General means to arms, to arms. Sans-culottism has arisen yet again from its death lair. Black deluges overflow the Tuileries. Spite of centuries, the sanctuary itself is invaded. Enter to the order of the day, torrent of dishevelled women wailing bread, bread. They have no bread and they have no constitution. That's always been the point. They wrench poor Frérot. They tumble him, trample him. Wrath waxing to see itself work. So that's, we've seen the end of men like Jean-Bertrand Frérot dies in this day, in this mob, 1795. He was one of the Thermidorians. And on top of him we have President Boissy d'Anglas. He sits like a rock. The rest of the convention is floated to the upper benches, sectioners, gendarmes, still ranking there to form a kind of wall for them. An insurrection rages and rolls its drums. Paper of grievances cannot get itself read for uproar. And the national representation, deluged with black sans-culottism, glides out for help elsewhere, for safety elsewhere. Remain hardly more than some 60 members, mere friends or even secret leaders, a remnant of the mountain crest, held in silence by Thermidorian thraldom. So there's a moment of panic for the Thermidorians here. And that remnant of the mountain crest, right, being the Jacobins, now emerge. The decrees of the 60 are not so much as rescinded, but they are declared null and non-extant, ultimately. So what happened was people like Legendre, Muscadins, right? There's this new movement of the Muscadins who want to put down Jacobinism, and they have youth, right? Guilt youth is on their side, and levelled bayonets and countenances. They say the decrees of the 60 are not so much as rescinded, they are declared null and non-extant. Rome, Roule, Goujon, these are the ringleaders, some 13 in all, are decreed accused. Sans-culottism, once more flung resupine, lies sprawling, its last. This is the last stand of it. 20th of May, 1795, says Carlyle. Ferrot's assassin flings himself from a high roof. All is lost. Old Roule shot a pistol through his old white head. Rome, Goujon, and the others stand ranked before a swiftly appointed swift military tribunal. Hearing the sentence, Goujon drew a knife, struck it in his breast, passed it to his neighbour Rome, and fell dead. Rome did the like, and another all but did it. Roman death rushing on there as in electric chain. The guillotine did the rest. Sansculottism sprawls no more. The dormant lion has become a dead one, says Carlyle. 20th of May, 1795. Chapter 6. Grilled herrings. So dies Sansculottism. The body of Sansculottism, or is changed. Pythian Carmagnole dance has transformed itself into a pyrrhic, into a dance of Cabarrus balls. So it was Sansculottism and had to have a violent end, but ultimately we do get the reign of the Cabarrus balls that we had, that we had before in chapter 2. Sansculottism is dead, extinguished by the new isms of that kind, which were its own natural progeny. Again, everything is about the natural progeny of what comes before, even as it descends into chaos. And this is what Ranke didn't understand when he said the revolution was put to bed, and cried when 1830 happened later. Carlyle states and maintains, despite all this, a meaning lay in it. Sansculottism verily was alive, a new birth of time. This is how Carlyle saw it. And it still lives, and is not dead, but changed. The soul of it still lives. Leopold von Ranke did not understand this, and hence couldn't understand the events of 1830. Sansculottism is changed. Changed into what? Well, this convention, now grown anti-Jacobin, did, with an eye to justify and fortify itself, publish lists of what the Reign of Terror had perpetrated, lists of persons guillotined. They contain the names of some 2,000, all but a few. There were above 4,000, cries Montgaillard, so that they want to publish these lists, they want to name and shame. Everything comes out when the regime collapses of the terror that it instituted. Anarchy, hateful as death, abhorrent. The whole nature of man exposed. And when the nakedness of Sansculottism and Jacobinism in particular are exposed to people, suddenly it's hated. The well-nigh insoluble problem, republic without anarchy. Have not we solved it? So these Thermidorians think. To anarchic republic of the poverties, there has succeeded orderly republic of the luxuries, which will continue as long as it can. A man of toil, thy struggling and thy daring, these 6 long years of insurrection and tribulation, thou hast profited nothing by it. This is the sentiment. This is the weariness. Years of trouble without profit. Years of tribulation. It was for a republic of Cabarrus and saloons. That's the bit that still irks the soul of France. Yes, nothing profited, but was it for Greek saloons? Was it for Cabarrus balls? Patience, says Carlyle. Thou must have patience. The end is not yet. And so we have a final chapter. The reality has to emerge. Chapter 7. The Whiff of Grapeshot. Evangel of Jean-Jacques, most other evangels, becoming incredible, what is there for it but to return to the old evangel of Mammon? Contra social is true or untrue. Brotherhood is brotherhood or death. But money will always buy money's worth. Aristocracy of feudal parchment has passed its way with mighty rushing, and by now, in natural course, we have arrived at the aristocracy of the money bag. Now, what generous heart can pretend to itself, or be hoodwinked into believing loyalty to the money bag is a noble loyalty? And that's what Carlyle believes is why the Directory can't succeed, or cannot be the end point, ultimately. Surely peace alone is fruitful. Anarchy is destruction, a burning up, say, of shams and insupportabilities. So vacancy and general ambition have come across this France. And what can anarchy do more? Let there be order, were it under soldier's sword. The convention, driven such a course by wild wind, wild tide, and steerage and non-steerage these 3 years, has become wary of its own existence, and sees all men wary of it. Sieyès, we say, is making the Constitution once more, as good as made it. This is the Abbé Sieyès, Emmanuel Joseph. He'd started much of this with his pamphlet, What is the Third Estate, in 1789, sort of political manifesto for revolution, and will ultimately try and write this new constitution, and he'll ultimately facilitate Napoleon into power. So right now he's making his constitution, 1795, but two-thirds of the convention must be re-elected. The active citizen electors shall for this time have a free choice of only 1/3 of the National Assembly. Such enactment of 2/3 to be re-elected we append to our constitution. We submit our constitution to townships of France and say, accept both or reject both. With directory of 5, with 2 good chambers, double majority of them nominated by ourselves, one hopes this constitution may prove final. So a couple of the detail of the buffer is needed. Section Le Pelletier, section of Paris, on this 12th day of Vendémiaire, 4th of October 1795, we've gone a whole year beyond the end of Robespierre, is sitting in open contravention. It's convent File Saint-Thomas Rue Vivienne with guns primed. So again, late 1795, we think that Abbé Sieyès has written this new document and we'll have some order. There's one part of Paris which just doesn't want to go along with it. Of course, there always is. Strong in law, it sends out, the convention is strong in law, and it sends General Menu to disarm this section. Some call for Barat to be made commandant. He conquered in Thermidor. Some, what is more to the purpose, bethink of them citizen Bonaparte, unemployed artillery officer. He took Toulon. He can go there and put these down. He's a man of head, a man of action. Barat is named Commandant's cloak. This young artillery officer is named Commandant. Thus there is permanent session through the night. And thus at sunrise in the morrow there is seen sacred insurrection once again. They've named Napoleon Commandant, and we have sacred insurrection on the next day. But this is the whiff of Grapeshot. This is the end of the revolution. Vendémiaire, 13th, year 4. Curious enough of all days, it is the 5th day of October, anniversary of that Menad March 6 years ago. Le Pelletier, this section in Paris, has seized the church of Saint-Roch, has seized Pont-Neuf. Citoyen Bonaparte is named General of the Interior by acclamation. Sections have to disarm in such humour as they may. Sacred right of insurrection is gone forever. The Sieyès constitution can disembark itself and begin marching. Why? Because he mentions the whiff of Grapeshot could put it down. He mentioned fire. Fire say the bronze lips and roar and thunder, roar and again roar, continual, volcano-like, goes his great gun in the cul-de-sac Dauphin and at the church of Saint-Roch. This has dealt with this sacred insurrection. It's no longer sacred. It's done. In old Broglie's time 6 years ago, this whiff of Grapeshot was promised, but it could not be given, says Carlyle. Could not have profited then. Now, however, the time is come for it, and the man has also come. You can behold him. Chapter 8. Finis. Just need to put an end to this. Carlyle just brings us up to the after show, right? A Babeuf insurrection next year will die in the birth, stifled by the soldiery. A senate, if tinged with royalism, can be purged by the soldiery. And an 18th of Fructidor, transacted by the mere show of bayonets. Nay, soldiers' bayonets cannot be used a posteriori on a senate and make it leap out of window, still bloodless, and produce an 18th of Brumaire. So he's signalling what is to come. Moniteur on the 5th of September 1797. We have the 9th of November 1799, the incident of Brumaire. Bloodless incident in which Napoleon seizes complete power. It is admitted that this directorate, which owned at its starting these 3 things, an old table, a sheet of paper, and an ink blot, and no visible money or arrangement whatever, did wonders. But does the empire of imposture waver? Right? Have we hit reality? Well, imposture is in flames. Imposture is burnt up. one red sea of fire, wild, billowing, enwraps the world. Higher yet higher flames the fire sea, crackling with new dislocated timber, hissing with leather and prunella. Referencing there Pope's essay on man. Carlyle's thinking about what eternal symbols have been either erected or smouldered in this revolution. Imposture is one of them. The other one is respectability. Well, respectability as a concept, Carlyle says, with all her collected gigs, flamed for the funeral pyre, wailing, leaves the earth, not to return save under a new avatar. Imposture, how it burns through generations, how it is burnt up for a time. The world is black ashes. He wants to reach what Carlyle calls the end of the dominion of imposture, with its darkness, opaque fire damp. That's what he wants to reach out after this revolution. And so he concludes with the following paragraph. And so here, O reader, has the time come for us to depart. Toilsome was our journeying together, not without offence, but it is done. To me thou art as a beloved shade, the disembodied, or not yet embodied, spirit of a brother. To thee I was but a voice. It was our relation a kind of sacred one. Doubt not that. For whatsoever once sacred things become hollow jargons, yet while the voice of man speaks with man, hast thou not there the living fountain, out of which all sacredness sprang, and will yet spring? Man, by the nature of him, is definable as an incarnated word. Ill stands with me if I have spoken falsely. Thine also it was to hear truly. Farewell.